Hello, everyone. This is Gary Wilson, and welcome to this week's live Path to Prosperity webinar. Welcome aboard, whether you're in the investor agent program, flipping, buying rentals, managing rentals, wholesaling, property management, whatever the program is here. And tonight's webinar is going to be about property management. I'm going to go into some reasons why we do it, because I know a lot of you are thinking, you're shaking your heads, you're thinking, oh boy, well, I don't want to have anything to do with property management. And I used to be the same way. But it's becoming such a big deal now that we're definitely going to cover it and give you some examples of why you may want to consider it. Even if you're not an agent or a broker, if you're simply an investor, stay on board here, because if you're managing your own properties, you definitely need tonight's webinars. And more importantly, if you've thought about incorporating that and offering it to other investors, that's what this is about. So that group that I taught yesterday, we're going to be starting next week. And Louie, I did get a quick message off to Beverly, and she confirmed, if any of you want to participate in this, okay, we haven't rolled out property management for quite some time, probably a year or two. And this wasn't planned. The rollout has been planned as far as rolling it out to the physical offices. But with that group starting next week, if you guys want to participate, you're certainly welcome to do so. I'll talk about that later on. But for right now, we're going to go into some reasons why, how do you profit from property management, whether you're managing your own or others, okay? If you invest in real estate, somehow or another you're tied to property management. I'm going to give you some tips and pointers and some tools you can use, okay? In fact, I'll go into a couple of websites you can use to determine what your rules are and regulations for your province or your state. In any case, let's go ahead and get started. But real quick though, for everybody for those of you who are relatively new, this may be your first or second webinar. You recognize that obviously you're in mute mode by default. You can ask questions in the chat box. That would be great. Okay, if you could do that, that'd be awesome. And I might actually unmute you from time to time to go into a specific conversation that everybody can listen to. Again, always look for the emails from Beverly the very next day. She gives you the recording of the webinar, of course, and also any updates to the systems, to the platform, scheduling changes. I think there was one scheduling change in September. I believe the webinar that was originally scheduled for the 19th, which was a Thursday, has been moved to Wednesday the 18th. Don't quote me on that. I think an email went out though, and I saw that on there. So just keep an eye out for that, okay? So without further ado, let me go ahead and jump into some material here. So hang on just one second. I'm going to first turn this on here. So let's do slideshow, current slide. All right, now let me go back here. Oops. And let me do a screen share. So hang on just one second, guys. Let's do a share. And there it is right there. So I'm going to share this with you. Okay. And I'm going to just leave it in basically draft or edit modes instead of me trying to switch back and forth to presentation mode. So this is for you if you're trying to manage your own rental properties, which I did in the beginning, and I'll be the first to tell you. It was a huge pain in the rear end, big learning curve, but I'm glad I did it. So when I work with new or newer investors, okay, and also particularly agents who want to manage properties, I do encourage you to do it in the beginning on your own properties, because you can learn from the school of hard knocks. Not an easy way to learn, but get those initial learning bumps out of the way. Learn what it takes to manage properties initially, okay? I know that sounds counterintuitive because we want to train you, but the fact is if you haven't been through it at all, you really don't know what to expect from your property manager should you decide to hire a property manager, okay? So let's assume you just bought your first property. Go ahead and manage it yourself. Maybe it's a duplex, single family home, what have you. And you can learn all the ins and outs of managing. What do you do when someone has a maintenance call? What do you do if somebody doesn't pay their rent on time? What do you do if there's a flood, a fire, if you have a death in one of your units? All these things are going to happen eventually, okay? What I want you to do is get a little bit of experience under your belt so that when you do hire someone, you'll know what to expect from them, and they'll know you know what to expect from them. Okay, so the way you talk, the way you present yourself. Okay, there's nothing better than coming into a situation prepared intellectually and emotionally based on experience, okay? Now, it leads me to one quick little caveat here. Back to the investing side, when you're buying your rental properties, even if you do intend to self-manage, always account for a fee to pay for property management as if you did have to pay for it, for two reasons. Number one is you may eventually decide to pay for property management, and if you don't account for it in your initial purchase, that money doesn't come from nowhere. It's got to come from somewhere, which is generally your profit. And let's say you're profiting only 20% from your properties, and you got to pay 10% property management that you did not account for in the beginning. Now your profit's down to 10%. Okay. So what I suggest to people is, even if you're going to self-manage, when you do your pro forma on the initial purchase and you do your projections of income and expense, put in there, the average is 8%, by the way, just put in 8% if you want to cover the cost of property management. So that if you eventually do hand it over, you've got that cost covered for in your original projections. Okay. It's not going to affect your bottom line. The other reason is this: property management is different than property investing. The roles are completely different. So even if you're self-managing, a lot of investors make the mistake of thinking, well, I won't pay for property management. I'll do it myself. I'll save some money. Then I can get this property and I'm covered on property management. I'm going to do it myself. Well, the fact is, you managing properties is a different set of roles and responsibilities that you should be paid for. Okay. So if you are self-managing, you should definitely pay yourself. Even if you choose to not take the draw, at least that money's sitting in there in profit, in the form of profit, okay? I think you should pay yourself, actually, based on all my years of experience. So that's the second reason, is the fact that you do deserve to be paid for what you're doing. You playing the role of manager is a separate role from investing. The most valuable use of your time is being the investor. So that's the other reason I want you to think of that. This is, if you're paying yourself 8 or 10% to manage your properties, and then you can profit 20% by owning the property, why wouldn't you do more ownership and less management? Well, over time, you may decide to do that, and you've got yourself covered. In any case, I think I beat that horse to death. So in any case, back to this. This is for you if you've been so frustrated you've actually considered selling your properties, and you bought to begin with for the whole reason of buying you some passive income and some personal freedom. So don't let the occasional tenant problem derail you and defeat you. There's circumstances that you can handle and manage, and you stay on track building your rental portfolio, okay? This is for you if you consistently have unpaid rents every month. If you've been to the magistrate so often they actually know you by first name. It actually happens, by the way. It's for you if you found your rentals trashed when tenants move out on a regular basis, or you can't remember the last time you raised rents. The class I taught today was a regular investor agent class. Several investors in there, and one of them sat in the front row saying she hasn't raised her rents in 3 years. She doesn't want to alarm her tenants. And I said, you're really making a mistake. So I want you to please write this down, guys. Just please take this note for what I'm going to give you here, which is this. You definitely want to raise your rents on an annual basis, even if it's only $5.37. Get in the habit of raising your rents every single year, okay? And not only conditions you to do that for yourself and your business, but it also conditions your tenants so they're not shocked if you don't raise rents for 3 years and all of a sudden you raised a rent and you got to raise it a lot more, like maybe $50 or $100 to compensate for what you've not been earning. It's going to shock them, okay? And you stand a greater chance of losing them. But if you raise your rents on an annual basis, something nominal, I mean, a good example for me was always, if I want to get 20 more bucks out of each unit, or 25, instead of raising it $20, I would raise it $19.58. Okay, some oddball figure, because psychologically, it looks like it's based on actual cost and not me just arbitrarily pulling a number out of the thin air, right? But more again, psychologically, it conditions you to raise your rents on a regular basis, which you should, because if you don't do that, by default, you condition yourself to not raise your rents. Then a year turns into 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and so forth. Not a good situation to be in. And again, it does kind of condition the tenants too. So always raise your rents on an annual basis, okay? All right, also, this is for you if you have a no pet policy, only to find out you have pets, okay? It's gonna happen, it happens to everybody. What's for you if you spend far too much time at your properties, away from your family and away from more profitable investing activities. And it's for you if you just simply want more profit and less problems, fewer problems, okay? So I'm going to show you a couple screens here as we go forward. I'm going to actually have to expand this because you're not going to be able to see that. So hang on one second, guys. Okay, now you can see this. So this is an example, oops, I'll go backwards here, of a property, just a little single family home, 3-bedroom home going back probably 20 years now, that was not profiting when we first took it over. And as a result of me applying these correct, proper property management principles, say that 5 times in a row, correct, proper property management principles. We turned it into a little moneymaker, $2,200 a year net cash flow after all expenses were paid, okay? Including the mortgage interest, all right? Not the principal, but the interest. That's an example of what's possible when you manage properties properly, okay? There's some other examples I'll show you here, so hang on just one second. I'm not gonna show you all these marketing or promotional screens. Let's see, I'm just gonna show you the meat and potatoes. Here's another one, check that out. This was another single family home. We were able to turn that around to basically be at a 50% profit margin. In other words, we were receiving in profit 50% of the gross proceeds. That's an unbelievable figure. In most cases, you're getting, if you're lucky, 20%, 30%, something like that. But to profit 50% off of gross, guys, that's a pretty good deal there. So that's as a result of us applying these principles properly, okay? In case you know about me, by the way, here's an example of what happens when you don't pay attention to your properties. This is a duplex I had years ago, beautiful giant property in the woods, great property, beautiful decking, and somebody moved out in the middle of the night, the proverbial left on a weekend kind of thing, unannounced, and then the other neighbor told us that, so went out to the property. Fortunately, the place wasn't that in bad a shape, but I went out to this upper master bedroom deck, and where they had this old doghouse, and the doghouse was in shambles. And I walked out there to see, just kind of kick it around. All of a sudden, these 2 little heads popped out. There's 2 little raccoons, and so I snapped a picture. I was obviously trying to keep my distance because I didn't want to take a chance on getting rabies or something. They were very docile, so I took a picture, and I should have evicted them because they were definitely not paying their rent. Now, here's an example of what happens when you do apply proper property management principles, okay? You end up with properties like this, much bigger, much better, all brick, Traco windows, obviously profiting. Let's see if I got the balance sheet on that one. Or excuse me, this was the P&L statement. Let's see if this is the one. This is it. So check this out. This is when we first bought it, okay? What I don't think I have here is what happened as a result of managing through issues for 3 years and literally going from about maybe $7,000, $8,000 a month net profit, total of $83,000 for the year on this building. We literally doubled it. I mean, we were making probably more than doubled it. We were making about $180,000 a year net profit from this building by applying proper property management principles, okay? And some of that did include raising some of the rents, okay? That was certainly part of it. But in any case, let's go into some meat and potatoes here. I just want to show you an example or some examples of why it's important that you do take this seriously, okay? And don't, here's the challenge with investing in real estate, particularly with rentals. You can learn how to buy rentals. I can teach you how to acquire the properties, but that's only half the battle. What most people don't teach is how do you actually manage for profit, manage the properties you already bought. That's a whole different set of skills. And yet there's hardly any education out there on that. I know because I looked when I first got started, I couldn't find anything other than like 2 books, so that was it. So the bottom line is this, is we've all been taught to buy the rental properties, but we've not been taught properly how to maximize profits and reduce or eliminate problems, okay? So the end result is this, is, we don't want you to give up on your dreams. We don't want you to sell your properties because they're a pain in the butt. Just learn to manage properly, okay? And keep your dreams alive. So I'm going to go into some lessons learned. I'm going to go into some details to give you guys some meat and potatoes to sink your teeth into tonight, okay? Lessons learned. Number one is, this is really critical, and I want you to please write this down, is the fact that you're in control, not your tenants, okay? You are in control. You got to learn to take responsibility for that. and act accordingly. Okay. Number two is if it can happen, it will happen. I've experienced it all. This is just the D's, the letter D in the alphabet. Death, drugs, dogs, diapers, divorce, dirt, drains, damage. That's probably the short list. Okay. That's just one letter of the alphabet. Just know this stuff's going to happen. Okay. But it doesn't mean it has to knock you out of the game. Just recognize the fact that it's part of the game, and you can minimize these problems by proper property management, right? Now, I'll also tell you this. I've learned a valuable lesson from one of my mentors years ago, and what he told me was this. He said, instead of continually being surprised and shocked by the things that people do, learn to expect challenges, learn to expect trouble. And when I changed my mindset, when things popped up, I wasn't so shocked by things. I wasn't so surprised. I just dealt with it, right? Okay, number three, you need a system. Just like any business, owning rentals is a business, just like any other business. You've got inventory, you've got clients, you've got income coming in, expenses going out, maintenance, repairs, profit, loss, income, expense, asset, liabilities. It is a business. And you need a system or a system of systems to run that business, okay? Number four is somebody has to know the neighborhoods. You or your neighbor have to know the neighborhoods. And there's a lot of tools you can use if you want to write this down. And we have different sets of websites and databases in the US and in Canada. So if you go to myinvestmentservices.com, okay, and click on the members area. I'm going to go through this slowly here. Click on the members area, all right? And then the next screen, you have to log into Silver. You got to log into the Silver level. Once you're there, on the left-hand side is a blue panel. You want to scroll down, and towards the bottom, you've got a couple of resource links. Click on those resource links, and you'll see several websites you can use to research people and properties, okay? Even if you have to use Stats Canada or US Census to gather the data, I would definitely do it. You want to make sure wherever you're buying properties, you're buying in the right area. You also want to make sure, even if you're not buying there, if you're going to manage for other people, you only want to manage in the areas that you want to manage in, okay? That's a critical thing. You don't want to end up in war zones. Don't take those properties. Some of me own them. I used to own some of them. It's not worth it, okay? It's just not worth it. Definitely own a minimum C or C+ properties, okay? So, by the way, one of the greatest tools you can ever use is every county has what's called a planning commission. Even the municipalities have a planning commission. So, London, Ontario has its own planning commission. Middlesex County, Middlesex Center, where it is, the county has its own planning commission. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania has its own planning commission. Allegheny County has its own planning commission. Use the planning commissions to gather valuable data on the areas. They drill down to the neighborhood level, and you get everything you need to know about the demographics, the social graphics, the housing data. It's all out there, okay? That's 1 through 4, okay? 5 through 8, all right? I love the example of Mother Teresa to give me 2 examples here. You want to operate with compassion. You're in a human relations business, okay? So you're going to have human relations challenges, and because you're providing housing, you're going to be inexorably drawn into those life challenges. Well, you can operate with compassion, and you can also operate profitably, okay? I can give you all kinds of examples, but every case is different. I wish I could tell you there was one set rule that applies for every situation, but that's just not realistic. What is realistic, though, is you do operate with compassion, but also rule with an iron fist, which is the next rule. Okay, Mother Teresa is a saint, helped hundreds of thousands of people, but she also ran at one point the largest charitable organization on the planet, and she ruled with an iron fist. Okay, she was an amazing taskmaster, amazing manager. In any case, number 7, learn as much as you can learn. Never ever stop learning. Be a student of the game. Constantly immerse yourself. Align yourself with the right mentors, training programs, anything you can do to enhance your level of knowledge and skill. And which leaves the next thing. You definitely need a teacher or a coach, which was why I'm here. Anything has to do with property management. Remember, I built the business out of that, so I can give you a lot of information. For those of you that you actually want to do this as a business, if you were to do the training program with this group from Kentucky, one of the Louisville, Kentucky market centers, you get all of the policies, procedures, everything that we developed when we had the brokerage company, it's all given to you, okay? You don't have to create any of that stuff. In any case, let's move on here, because I want to go into some more nitty-gritty details. These are just more examples of properties that we took over and managed to profit, okay? But here's what the things I want you to think about, okay? If you're going to pursue this, let's say you're managing your own units and you're not even a licensee. The reality is you can actually manage properties for one other person without a license in almost all the states in the US. In Ontario, Canada, believe it or not, as strict as we are in Ontario about getting our realtor's license, I mean, we're talking more than 250 hours of licensing classes to get your realtor's license. They don't require it for property management. In Ontario, there's no requirement to have a license to manage properties. Okay, now back to the original example, once you add a second client, you have to have a license, at a minimum a realtor's license with a broker. Somebody's got to be the broker. You don't have to be the broker, by the way. If your office has E&O insurance that covers property management, then you can manage properties under that corporate umbrella. If they don't, you have to set up a separate company, okay? In the States, they're LLCs, in Canada, they're just corporations. You would have a separate broker of record and a separate E&O policy, okay? So here's what I'm getting at with this. If you're going to pursue that, you want to have the end in mind, what it is that you're looking to accomplish. How many units do you want to manage? What do you want your income to be per unit, okay, on the management side of things? You want to write all that down and consider all of that. You also want to think about in the beginning, how are you going to launch? I just had this conversation with Louis earlier, and what I did is when I had enough clients asking me if I can manage their properties, I felt like I could launch it and be successful and have enough business coming in to make it worth my while. So the original launch was a total of about 40 units, okay? That's all it was. It did grow to 700 units in about 3 years. I almost spent no money on advertising. To get new clients, I spent almost no money on advertising. I did spend money on advertising to lease the vacancies, okay? But back to this, that was my initial launch, and I'll go into some more details later about some of the tools you need, but I had a goal in mind, which was I wanted to have a handful of clients bringing me their units so that made it worthwhile to manage. It wasn't going to be like a huge pain in the rear end. So details, we'll go into the details in a little bit. We'll go into some ongoing things you need to be aware of. And at the end of the day, how do you actually profit, which is show me the money. So the end in mind, here's what you can take a screenshot of this if you want, guys, or just write this down. You definitely want to know how much money you want to make on the management side of things, right? Again, whether you're managing for yourself or others. You should have a pretty good idea why you want to do it. I mean, making money is nice, I get that. But for me, the big why was it gave me another source of business serving clients I already had. I already had the clients. I was now getting commissions from them, helping them buy and sell properties. I now have property management, okay? And eventually built an appraisal business, a lending business, and a title business, all focused on that one same client. I mean, I had thousands of them, but I only had to get the client relationship once. Now I was able to serve them multiple times, okay? So to me, it was all about diversing my business streams of income, thinking more exponentially, not linearly, and basically buying more freedom. I also learned one valuable lesson in business. When it comes to real estate investing is just one part of a bigger idea. The bigger idea is you should have businesses and investment real estate, both. In my opinion, they should be related. That was always my big why. When? Well, you should say, I want to start this by December 31st. I want to start this by October 1st. Whatever it is, make sure you have that written down. It needs to be in writing, okay? Where? You definitely want to, remember we talked about that earlier, where do you want to be? Do you want to be in a big city like Toronto or LA, or do you want to be out in the suburbs? I'll tell you my personal opinion is go out in the suburbs. Property management is generally very weak in the suburbs. There's a great demand for it, and it's easy to grow a business. I mean, Louis and I were talking about this. There's a company up in the lower part of Ontario near Niagara that's growing quite rapidly because they've obviously figured this out. We're not the only smart people on the planet. Okay, so let's move on here. In the beginning, I'm going to go over some things you need to consider when it comes to managing your own properties, or again, managing for other people. Key components you want to take notes on this stuff. Okay. Number one is the game of managing rentals is won or lost in the screening process. Okay. How effective are you at screening your prospective tenants? That's where the game is won. All right. Again, this is assuming you've already got the properties and you've already bought the correct properties. Now we're talking about management. So you can actually start your screening in your advertising. So when you put your ads out there for vacancies, you want to provide as much information as possible. Do never provide the address. Don't never provide the address. Just provide 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, 3rd floor, near Lincoln Elementary School, something like that. What that does is it will attract people who want a 3-bedroom apartment, 3rd floor, near Lincoln Elementary School. And anybody who doesn't want that type of unit, doesn't want to be in that area, they won't call you. If all you do is put out there a 3-bedroom available next month, you'll get all kinds of calls. You've got to screen, and half of them you were probably wishing you hadn't spent time with them. So pre-screen in your advertising, okay? And responding to ads, remember this, you always want to use a telephone questionnaire. You'll always have them leave a message. You want to have a separate phone number, have them leave a message on the separate number, call them back, you call the callers back, and you go through the telephone questionnaire, which looks a lot like an application, by the way. Then you eventually show the rentals. I always show mine on Saturdays, starting at 9 in the morning, finishing at 5 in the afternoon. Do them in 2-hour intervals. So I might be at one unit from 9 to 11, another unit from 11 to 1, 1 to 3, and 3 to 5. And I would schedule the appointments in time intervals within that 2-hour chunk. So I would put them in at 10 or 15-minute intervals. That way I always had traffic coming through. And by the way, it also meant I only showed the apartment one time to all the interested parties, not spread out over all the week and all that kind of stuff. And also created urgency and scarcity amongst the viewers. Remember, I'd already pre-screened them. Okay, I already pre-screened them. Now, in the rental unit, if they express an interest, I would have them fill out the actual application right there on the spot, okay? Fill out or sign the deposit agreement form and have them leave with me the application fee, and the security deposit check, okay? Always grab that at the time you show the unit. That's also a test to see who's serious, by the way. Now let's talk about subsidized housing. There's we call it different things in US and Canada. Basically, it's tenants are receiving a subsidy to pay for rents. At one point, I had a lot of tenants receiving subsidy in some of the buildings I had. I eventually stopped leasing to tenants who were in single-family homes and receiving a subsidy because the governing bodies were lowering their rates, which made no sense to me, while they were raising the rents on the apartments. So I increased the number of people I let in who were receiving subsidy in the apartments, okay? In any case, over the years, they started cracking down and becoming stricter with the owners and more lenient with the tenants. So over time, I ended up not really having any Section 8 tenants at all, okay? Charitable organizations. You definitely want to make sure that these are part of your Rolodex, okay? In fact, they'll call you from time to time, okay? And what they're doing is your tenant may be in trouble and they'll provide 1 month's rent for them to get out of the hot water they're in. Or if they're somebody, like if somebody leaving an abusive relationship, they would receive a deposit and first month's rent. And we would rent to those folks through these organizations. But a bigger picture is this. I started turning over some of my units to refugee families, okay? Back in the 90s, it was for people from Bosnia. They were coming to Canada and the US in droves. Bosnia was being torn apart by war, unfortunately. It was a sad situation. So I started doing that. So I made money. I still profited from the properties, but I just made available certain chunks of properties to these refugees. So it was just a different source of business. Well, later on, Catholic charities and Jewish community centers started forming bonds to sponsor families from Burma and Nepal. And they would bring them in through the immigration process, and we would place them in our units, and they would get their first month's rent paid plus deposit. They ended up being the best tenants, guys. That ended up being a huge profit center for me, okay? I was literally profiting from the act of sponsoring families from these foreign countries. I did reduce the rent by about $25 per unit per month. But they had, once the charitable organization had paid their first month's rent, that tenant was then responsible for their rents going forward, okay? So that was a requirement, and it worked. I mean, they were hardworking people. Wonderful experience, okay? And again, charitable organizations. Okay, now let's get into some details, right? Although you see there's some websites here, I'm not going to click on those, but there's websites available to you that show you your landlord-tenant law for your state or province. There are also websites that show you charts and graphs, charts of information on how do you handle security deposits, okay? Because I'm going to check for questions here real quick, so hang on just one second. Let's see. Whoops. For some reason, that didn't show me the questions. Hang on one second. Let me go back to the chat box. I'm not sure why that did that. Let's see if it's going to show up here. Hang on one second. That didn't give me what I wanted. Okay, chat box. Here we go. It's finally popped up. Okay. Christian said yes, the 19th would move to the 18th. Thank you, Christian. Will the documents apply to Canada? So Lou, yeah, there's policies and procedures. You'll get the set that applies to Canada. The individual leases are by province or state, so we don't really provide that. The tools we use, like for accounting and bookkeeping, absolutely you can use them in US or Canada, okay? The only thing that's really different are the leases. And in fact, they actually look a lot alike, I can tell you. But you definitely want to use an Ontario lease in Ontario. And if you're in Maryland, you want to use a Maryland lease. By the way, it leads me to one quick thing here. On the lease, no matter what province or state you're in, make sure you're using the lease from your board of realtors or from your province or from your state that's pre-approved in the province or state. Typically pre-approved to the court system, and also predetermined to meet what's called the plain language laws, okay? So I know there's a lot of leases out there on the internet, all kinds of homegrown leases. Well, I gotta tell you guys, there's been a lot of famous cases where judges would throw out a case because a lease that was brought to them was not deemed to be pre-approved in the court system, and also not deemed to meet the plain language laws. So here's what we recommend: use your lease that's provided to you, through your state or province. And if you want to add other special language, do that in the form of an addendum. And matter of fact, I'll share with you guys what I call my rules and regulations. So we added that to the lease in the form of an addendum. And if you understand contract law, an addendum overrides the contract whatever the addendum is being attached to, any language in the addendum overrides the language in the contract that it's being attached to. Okay, let's see here. Is marketing to corporations for rentals different? Yes, so Louis, if you're looking to attract new owner clients to manage your properties for them, you would only approach the privately owned properties who are advertising. So if you have a corporation, another property management company advertising the rentals, you would not approach those guys. I mean, they would obviously, probably not like that. But if you have individual, we call them mom and pops, individual owners who are advertising their rentals, we made a fortune approaching those guys, okay? We would literally scour the ads every day looking to see who's advertising their homes for rent, single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, whatever they were advertising for rent. We would contact them, okay? And we would get a lot of business that way. So in any case, David Elliott, okay, will you be sharing the PowerPoint tomorrow? I'm gonna see if I can get this in Beverly's hands to send this to you guys, at least the pertinent slides. Because a lot of these key things here, guys, these are critical things to consider. So excellent question. So let's go back to this. So we talked about the lease, we talked about rules and regulations. And by the way, rules and regulations typically include things like little details that are not usually covered in the lease. Things like trash cans. Who's responsible for the trash cans? Well, I think the tenant should be responsible for the trash cans. The personal trash cans in the individual units. If you got a big building and you've got dumpsters, obviously you have to maintain a dumpster. But the individual units, that tenant's responsible for their own trash cans. Drugs, fuel. People sometimes will leave cans of gasolines in the hallway, for example. Guns, nuisance calls, things like that. All those little things you can document in rules and regulations. Okay, security deposits. Security deposits are pretty sensitive. In fact, in Quebec, some of you may be in the province of Quebec. In fact, I think some of you are. We have students up there. In Montreal, you can't collect a security deposit. It's not part of the system. They don't allow it, okay? In some other states and provinces, you can collect only two things, either first month's rent and deposit or first month's and last month's rent, but you cannot collect all three, first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit. In some states, I've never seen a Canadian province allow you to do all three. I have seen some states allow you to collect all three. Whenever possible, collect as much as you can possibly collect, okay? But what I was getting at earlier is this. Security deposits is one of those areas where I see if there's ever going to be trouble for an owner or a property manager, it almost always has to do with how security deposits are handled. They always have to be kept in a separate escrow account, separate from your operations account. Remember, your rent checks go in the operations account and you pay your expenses out of that. Your security deposit goes in what's called an escrow account. See, when you collect security deposits, you're actually acting as like a custodian, basically an escrow agent, because that's not your money. That's actually the tenant's money, okay? Which is a big misunderstanding amongst a lot of investors. That money actually belongs to the tenants, and you're taking that money, housing it separately in a separate account during their tenancy, okay? Typically, you've got to return it to them within 30 days of them vacating at the end of the lease term. Sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 15. You can look at your own laws in your own province or state to see what those regulations are. If you keep any portion of the deposit, you've got to actually disclose why you did that. You have to document. You had to repair a doorknob, for example, and you've got to provide a receipt for the material and the labor, by the way, okay? And when you send once a person moves out, if you did keep any portion of the deposit, you got to send that to them within 30 days, typically 30 days, okay? It could be 15, could be 45, depending on your area. Okay, what I'm going to talk about now is pets and smokers, okay? We used to have what's called a pet policy, a no pet policy, only to find out we had pets. So what we did was we turned it into a profit center. So this was the whole premise behind the title of the program, Turning Rental Problems into Real Estate Profits, is that we would took situations that were a nuisance for us, a thorn in our side, and ask the questions. We literally get up a board and sit around and brainstorm, how can we turn this negative into a positive? It almost always that shows up in the form of profit. So for pets, we started instituting having a pet policy. We will advertise in the ads for the rentals. A pet policy applies. Number one, it discloses we have a pet policy. Number two is it advertises that we allow pets. And it accomplished a couple of things. Number one is we attracted the good pet owners and repelled the bad pet owners. I mean, think about it. Somebody who's not a good pet owner and they see pet policy applies, they're going to go run the other way and go to find some other person to rent from. But the people who were good pet owners, they do expect to be in a decent place to have a pet policy. And we would charge a separate deposit for the pet and a separate rent for the pet. We literally had a separate deposit agreement and a separate lease, a separate application for the pet. And in the lease, we put the pet information on the lease. It was that serious, okay? It turns out, guys, even though we still had an occasional, we had to replace a carpet or something like that, the amount of money we made far outsurpassed any headaches we had from having the pets, all because we had a proper pet policy, okay? Same thing with smokers. Smokers are not a protected class. There's not discrimination to say no smoking allowed. But again, what we found out was occasionally we'd have people who said they weren't smokers or saw the policy and they were still smoking. They often would say, well, we just go out onto the deck and nobody can tell. No, people can still tell. So we decided to have a a smoker's policy. Now, what we did was because of people with allergies, same thing with pets. We would designate certain properties and certain floors of certain properties for pets and for smokers, for example. The smokers we would generally put up on the top floor, which is kind of ironic because usually smokers are maybe not in the best of shape and they don't want to climb up 4 sets of stairs. That would have been the first floor. But we were not going to allow the smokers to be on the first floor. Made them always go to the top floor, okay? And the pets we would always try to keep on the ground floor, okay? For obvious reasons. Now, so in the smoker policy, same thing. We would say smoking policy applies or smokers welcome, that kind of thing. And we would charge an extra money, extra deposit, and we'd also charge extra rent, okay, for the smokers, okay? We basically made a profit center out of that, the nuisance, all right? In any case, we also have a what's called a nuisance call fee. So if people let somebody in one of your units and they end up calling you, multiple times for the same thing, or they constantly call you for all these little things, if you have a nuisance call policy, you can implement the nuisance call fee, $25 a call after the first 3 calls for something like that. Here's how this came about. It turns out a lot of local police forces, local municipalities have what's called a nuisance call policy themselves. So if there's a rental property that's constantly generating phone calls to the local police, they can impose a fine on you, not the tenant, but on you, the owner or property manager, okay? So we decided to have our own nuisance call policy with all of our rentals. And that ended up, it wasn't a big profit center, but it sure did reduce the number of calls we got, okay? Well, let's talk about protected classes. The bottom line is don't discriminate. It's not worth it anyways. It's not necessary, number one, and you don't want that kind of trouble, okay? Doesn't matter what your preferences are. It doesn't matter. But what matters is the potential to profit. So if someone has the ability to pay and you qualify, rent the rental unit to them, okay? Evictions are a big deal. Boy, I got to tell you, probably one of the most emotionally challenging processes in this whole business is having to evict tenants from time to time. Doesn't happen a lot, but it's going to happen, okay? Now, one thing you can do to avoid the possibility of having to go to court, get the judgment, bring in the constable, and physically extract people, is to have what's called a cash for keys policy, okay? Please write this stuff down, guys, all right? This is what the banks do, all right? When they take over a foreclosure property and people are still there, what they do is instead of trying to take them to court, they offer them what's called cash for keys. In other words, I would give you, if you can be out by the weekend, I will give you $1,000. If you can be out by the end of the month, I'll give you $500, whatever it is, okay? And that often works. Number one, if you don't do that and you have to go through the court eviction process, they're not paying rent right now. They're probably not going to pay during the eviction process, which means you've lost another month's rent. And if you're charging $1,000 a month rent, why not just say, look, I'll give you $1,000 if you leave by the end of the month or end of the week. It may cost you $1,000, but it saved you another $1,000. You follow what I'm saying? So in any case, just a real neat little trick there we used over the years. Okay, ongoing, more details, guys, and then we're going to wrap this up here in about 10 minutes. Just want to give you these things to write down so you understand what you need to prepare, how you need to prepare, and what is involved with managing properties, okay? So maintenance and repairs, obviously you're going to manage the calls coming in, maintenance and repair calls coming in. And you're going to assign those work assignments to your local contractors. Those folks you don't hire yourself internally. These are independent contractors that work on a contract basis, okay? But that's typically things that are routine, regular maintenance and repairs that are paid for out of the rent proceeds. The next category are your buildings and improvements. These are typically capital improvements, like a new roof, new windows, new kitchen, new bathroom, things like that. In that situation, what we do is we make the arrangement, we connect the owner of the property with the contractor, okay? And we let them work out the payment arrangement between them. Because if you got to put on a new roof on a property, that's the owner's responsibility, not you as the manager, okay? And you don't want to take on that burden of being responsible for paying that contractor. That needs to be the owner's responsibility. Okay, it's usually way more than what's in the account for the owner. In other words, they've only got typically 1 month's rent in there. Okay, so in any case, bookkeeping. Here's my recommendation, whether you're in the U.S. or Canada, because when you're first starting off, especially for your own units, just use QuickBooks, the basic version. That's all you need. QuickBooks Basic works great for small individual owner type operations. Okay, now, if you're going to start managing for other people, 2 or more people, go ahead and get QuickBooks Pro. It allows you to set up different companies within QuickBooks in the accounting system. So each company is a different owner entity. And within that company, you can identify the individual properties. Within the individual properties, you can identify the individual tenants. It allows you to do all of that, and all of the accounting is spot on, perfectly matches how your taxing authorities work. They're used to it. It's an industry standard. Everybody recognizes it. Okay. Now that's going to keep you going to maybe 100 units or something like that. But let's say now you're managing more than 100 units and you've got multiple owners. Maybe you've got 20 owners, 50 owners. Maybe you've got 100 owners. What you may want to consider is a system called Propertyware. Okay. Propertyware historically has been the Cadillac of property management systems. It does provide owner portals and tenant portals, so the owners can look at anything they want to look at related to the property without calling you. They can get the reporting online. The tenants can pay their rents online. They can submit maintenance requests online, all without calling you. So it reduces your labor costs dramatically. It's an expensive system, but boy, is it worth it. So in the beginning, just use QuickBooks and Excel spreadsheets. When you get have a bigger business, you can bring in something like Propertyware. Okay, so that's bookkeeping. Okay, life in the trenches. Stuff's going to happen. You're going to have fires. You're going to have water damage. Torrential downpours. Some parts of the U.S. you'll have, like right now, hurricanes going up the East Coast. Okay, I've had that happen. And properties in Virginia, by the way. I actually had properties in Pennsylvania flood as a result of the remnants of 2 prior hurricanes. Crazy, but it happens, okay? Just know this. The better equipped you are management-wise, the better you're going to be able to address these scenarios when they actually do pop up, okay? They're not a lot of fun, but the more structured you are, the more quickly you're going to be able to get through these circumstances and move back into position of profit. Now, real quick, since I talked about flooding, generally speaking, your homeowner's policies, your property insurance policies are not going to cover water damage, okay? Especially that comes from flooding from natural causes like rain, hurricanes, tornadoes, monsoons, whatever, okay? You have to have a separate flood policy, flood insurance, okay? So in any case, just always remember that. When I got a lot of my properties flooded back in 2004 from those hurricanes, I was covered because I had flood insurance policies on those properties. Thank goodness I did. I ended up making money on the whole thing. Actually, if you can imagine that, that's crazy. But my properties were worth more as a result. I had everything, new kitchens, new flooring, new everything. I raised the rents. It ended up being a profitable scenario for me. Okay, but I was set up properly to handle those scenarios. All right. Good cop, bad cop. I actually did have to evict a police officer one time. Sounds crazy, but it happened. Just know this, you want to be always prepared with your documentation, because there are people out there who are very intelligent when it comes to the landlord-tenant business. And if you're not prepared, you don't have everything documented, you can find yourself on the losing end of a suit, okay? Death, it's going to happen. I'll just mention one thing on this. When there's a death in one of your units, again, and this sounds kind of dark, but it's going to happen, so I'm going to talk about it. Typically, the coroner, like let's say, the police are called, whatever, you're going to have to expect the coroner to come by. Typically what they'll do is they'll tape off your unit. You can't access it. Doesn't matter if you're the owner or not. While the coroner's there doing their investigation, they tape it off and you can't access the property. And it could take a day, it could take a couple of days, it could take a week. They have to give you clearance to be able to go back into the property, okay? And if there's any bodily fluids involved, like this happened to me one time, somebody had collapsed in the kitchen, hit their head on the stove, and of course there was some blood on the floor. You have to have a special cleaning crew come in and clean that. You can't just go in with you and a bottle of Windex and do it. No, you have to have a special crew do that. There's laws about this stuff, okay? And you need to protect your workers too, by the way. Okay, let's go on to the good stuff here. Show me the money. All right. You definitely want to cash flow, and here's the number of ways you can cash flow. Obviously, you can collect, and you can write these down if you want, by the way. A leasing fee to lease a vacancy, a lease application fee from new prospective tenants, a lease renewal fee. Every year the lease renews, you should collect the renewal fee. Pet fee, smoker fee, nuisance call fee, all these fees. We also charge owners a 10% override on maintenance and repairs, and we charge the tenants, we charge the contractors a 10% override on maintenance and repairs, okay? So this is a huge profit center, guys. In fact, just think about what we just went over there. All those sources of fee income spell profit for you. And if you just consider the maintenance and repair override, 10% on the owner, 10% on the contractor, that's a 20% override to you on every maintenance and repair call that you get. Huge profit center. Okay. In any case, also, if you think about it, I mean, my gosh, if we want to buy properties ourselves and we're managing for other people, look no further. When your owners want to sell and you know the properties, you know it's a good deal, take the property yourself, okay? Strike a good deal. In any case, we talked about acts of God, hurricanes and fires and stuff like that. Acts of charity in the floods. I'll just tell you this briefly. I went in there with the intention to get the properties back up and running as fast as I possibly could. The reality was, though, guys, those people needed help. They had their electricity cut off, the gas cut off, the water cut off. They were living went back into the Stone Ages. And when the sun went down, it was dark, okay? And they were literally out there trying to pull stuff out of their houses and apartments, like literally little old ladies wiping off 100-year-old photographs of their parents' baby pictures or something like that. So on the first day, I realized they just need help. And all we did for the next 3 days to a week was just help people basically clean up and salvage whatever they could salvage. And then we went in and started working on the electric panels and furnaces and water tanks and things like that. But here's the thing, because I took that position, it was more instinctual. As a result, almost all of my tenants came back and rented from me. Even though I raised the rents, they still came back and stayed for years. And I would see people in the grocery store, the library, children who I coached in soccer leagues, will come with me as adults and say, hey, they call me Coach Wilson. They just remember me fondly, and they say, we came back because you took care of us first before you took care of your properties. That's what they said. So you can be profitable and be charitable at the same time. Now, the final thing is selling the property, okay? And if you're managing for other people, chances are you do, or you should have a license, okay? You should get that contract to sell the property, okay? Get the commission on the listing side, and if you're lucky, get the buyer commission too. So now you've helped these people buy the property, you got commission then, you manage the properties for them, you got all those fees over all those years. At the end of the day, you either bought it yourself because they want to sell, or you list it and sell it for somebody else and get that commission also. That's why this is so profitable. Here's why, for those of you who are in Keller Williams, here's why Keller Williams has rolled this out. Not just the fee structure, but also all the contact information. We've got contact information now on the owners, the tenants, municipal employees, utility employees, contractors, inspectors, appraisers, lenders, attorneys, insurance provider, people. That's 10 right off the bat there. All of that information, phone number, email address, sometimes actual address, physical address, that we can market to sell our services, whether they're helping them buy and sell their own homes, or help them buy investment properties or manage the properties for them should they own their own investment properties. Huge source of leads, guys. This is tremendous. Let me do this. I'm going to try to wrap this up here, but I want to ask you guys something. Give me a chat, put something on the chat there, or do a hand raise if you're interested in actually pursuing this yourself. Because it's just more than uncanny. This happens all the time. So Louis and I had this conversation earlier. I literally just taught the first property management class in person in an office yesterday. Yesterday. They're starting next week. If you want to participate with them, do me a favor. Just send an email. Just email me, or if you want to do it on your phone, just text me. Text me now. You all have my number. It's 412-680-3618, and say, put in there, I'm interested in property management, okay? And what I'll do is I'll call you tomorrow. So tomorrow I've got to drive from Tulsa, Oklahoma to Dallas, Texas, about a 4-hour drive in the east afternoon hours, 1 to 5 Central Time. What I'll do is I'll call you. I'll go over things with you. And by the way, if you're an active student, if you're a current student, remember, any other program you take, you don't have to pay full price. You get it for half price. That's great. But here's what I want you to do it. I want you to do it because we already have a group of people starting next week, and you can piggyback on that group and go through the training with them over the next 8 weeks. Okay. So this is a huge opportunity for you to not just save money, but be part of it with a group of other people. So in any case, let me check the chat box here and we will wrap this up. Let me try to reduce this. I'm not sure why. Let's go to the participants. Oops, here we go. It's not showing me the chat box. I'll get the chat box here later, but if you could text me, guys, my phone's on silent mode, 412-680-3618, and I promise I'll call you tomorrow. So if you text me, that's better because I'll have your phone number automatically. And come up with all the questions you want. Let's just hammer this out and make sure you're making a good decision there. So anyways, guys, that's pretty much it for tonight. Great session. Again, it was just intended to be next week, but we moved it up because of all the activity related to property management. By the way, on the 18th, Louis is going to come back in and go over all those other additional research systems we use up in Canada to find out information on people and properties. Make sure you're on for that one. Next week, we're going to go over some creative purchasing techniques that will help you and your clients. Okay, if you're an agent representing clients, if you're investing yourself, you definitely want to participate in that. So without further ado, guys, thank you for participating tonight. I will see you next week, which is, by the way, on the 9th, which is Monday, so 7 p.m. Eastern again. We'll see you then. In the meantime, God bless you and your families, and we will see you next week. Okay, take care, guys. Bye-bye.